Dear Juan Soto, saw the contract news. Congrats. $750 million feels a little light to me, but
slightly biased.
Anyways, if you're ever in need of financial help over the years, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always
slightly biased.
Who's there? Who is that? It's not funny. Oh my God! No! It's December.
Time to get on the trade
I thought I still had 2 more months.
It's over.
No, not the trade machine.
Get on the trade machine right now.
No, it's
Start making
December.
trades.
I still have so much time. I still have so much left to give. All right, folks, we're still 2 months away from the trade deadline. I usually hate doing trade content, especially this early in the season, but I can't ignore some of this trade slop that came across my desk this morning. I was thinking about doing this on the Slightly Biased Clips channel. You know, I might start this thing where if a topic that I want to talk about pops up and I don't want to spend a full day editing a video or whatever the case may be, I might just ramble for a little bit, put a fireside on, put a little fire on in the background, call it a fireside chat, and just, throw it on the Clips channel. So make sure you subscribe to the Clips channel. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. We're so close to 1 billion subs. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. But this Jimmy Butler news, I feel like deserves a little bit more of my attention, especially considering my Dallas Mavericks are included in this slop. So I feel like I'm obliged to talk about it in a little bit more detail. According to Shams Charania, the Miami Heat are open to listening to trade offers for Jimmy Butler. The Heat are open to listening to offers for Butler and making a deal if the proposal is right, league sources told ESPN. And Butler's agent, Bernie Lee, has indicated in league circles that Butler is open to destinations such as 2 of the Texas teams, Houston Rockets and Dallas Mavericks, San Antonio Spurs, shit into the stick there, and the Golden State Warriors. Butler is a native of Houston, Texas. Above all, though, he's believed to prefer a win-now title contender in any trade. So there's been a decent amount of smoke about Jimmy Butler and potentially getting traded for a while now. He has a player option this next upcoming season, and he hasn't really been shy about it. He's probably going to opt out of that, and he's looking for a max contract extension, which would be over $50 million a year. And trading for Jimmy Butler, it's going to be weird. He's 35 years old. He's making $48 million this year, which makes trading for him right now incredibly difficult to begin with. You also have to find a team that's willing to open up their checkbook and give Jimmy Butler $50 million going into his age 36, 37, 38, 39-year-old season. This is a guy who's missed some time already this year with an injury, played 60 games last year, missed the playoffs last year with an injury, played 64 the year prior, 57 the year before that, 52, 58. A guy who's getting older, a guy who's dealt with injuries over the past few years. It's a weird trade target. And he's clearly not the player he once was when he was like a legitimate MVP candidate, and even the guy he was a few years ago when he led the Miami Heat to the NBA Finals. But he's still a really good basketball player, and he could be a great number 2, number 3 option for a team, and could even be like a pseudo number 1 guy where he doesn't have to carry your team, but when your team needs that, he can do that. And that's what I think of when I think of the Houston Rockets. So I went through every single team in the NBA trying to figure out which teams should be interested, which teams would be interested in extending Jimmy Butler at the price point that he wants, and which teams would be interested in giving up assets in order to make a trade happen. And beyond that, which teams can even do it? Like right off the bat, you've got the second apron teams like the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Phoenix Suns. These teams cannot make a trade for Jimmy Butler. Like they're out of contention immediately. I kind of thought Timberwolves, can they get out of the Julius Randle business and replace him with, it's impossible. They cannot make it happen. There is like a funny Damian Lillard for Jimmy Butler straight up trade, which is just funny to think about because Dame would finally be on the Heat, but I don't think the Bucks would entertain that whatsoever. Let's just start here. Let's start with the teams that Jimmy Butler's agent indicated that he would be interested in, and let's just get right into the Dallas Mavericks. I'm here to tell you right now, as a Mavericks fan, it's cool that the Mavericks are included in conversations like this. It's cool that they've reached the point where stars are looking at them and like, I want to be there. I would love to get traded to the Dallas Mavericks. This trade cannot happen. It can't happen. I mean, it can happen. It's possible. But it is so complicated. The Mavericks would have to trade 4, 5, 6 players to make it happen. 4 or 5 of those players would have to be in their rotation. I mean, this is the trade that I came up with. Klay Thompson, Daniel Gafford, Maxi Kleber, Najee Marshall, Markieff Morris. With the Mavericks getting Jimmy Butler and then Thomas Bryant back to make the contracts work. You could replace Klay Thompson with PJ Washington if you wanted to. I don't think the Mavericks would or should do that. Now, here's where the problems come in a trade like this. You're trading away Klay Thompson. This isn't NBA 2K. right? You went out and you got Klay Thompson in free agency. Klay Thompson wanted to play for you. He left the Golden State Warriors. He turned down more money from the Los Angeles Lakers. It would be a horrible look if you were to turn around and trade him at the trade deadline. I think that's completely and totally off the table. Now, if you replace Klay Thompson with P.J. Washington, is Jimmy Butler a better player than P.J. Washington? Yes, of course. That goes without saying. But P.J. Washington's become an elite, one of the best role players in the league for you. And then on top of that, you're cutting into your depth further by trading one of the best backup centers in the league in Daniel Gafford, trading Maxi Kleber, but whatever, that's a contract you can get rid of, but trading one of the best offseason signings in Najee Marshall, and then just throwing Markieff Morris in there as well to make contracts work. This makes no sense for the Dallas Mavericks. If this were a year ago, I would be on board. I would be on board with a trade like this before the Dallas Mavericks made the finals, when they were around 500 going into the trade deadline. I would have been all aboard. If it was Tim Hardaway Jr., Grant Williams, whatever the fuck else to make contracts work, yes, let's do it. You need that big three in Luka, Kyrie, and Jimmy Butler. But now the Mavericks have made the finals. They made moves at the deadline last year to become a much deeper, much more well-balanced team. They made the NBA Finals. They're off to a great start so far this season. They're really starting to click, really starting to play the basketball that we were expecting them to play, and a lot of that has to do with the great depth that they have built. The last thing this team should be doing is breaking up that depth, taking away your biggest strength, which is your depth currently, and bringing in an older 35-year-old Jimmy Butler, who, yeah, that would be great. Luka, Kyrie, and Jimmy Butler is disgusting. And you can imagine, if this were the trade package, you can imagine a starting five of Luka, Kyrie, Jimmy, P.J. Washington, and Derek Lively. That's a really good fucking team. But what would your bench look like? Your bench would be Thomas Bryant, Dante Exum, Quentin Grimes, Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Another thing to consider, the Mavericks will more than likely extend Luka Doncic this upcoming offseason, Supermax, obviously. Kyrie Irving has a player option that he will almost certainly opt out of and will more than likely get a blank check from the Dallas Mavericks because of how good he's been. You're also going to give Jimmy Butler $50 million a year on top of that? I really doubt that. That would put you in the second apron territory, and good luck. Good luck fleshing out the rest of your roster if that's the case. So it's cool that Jimmy Butler mentioned the Dallas Mavericks. They're off the table entirely. What about the other two teams that he mentioned? The Houston Rockets is an interesting one. I mentioned at the top that Jimmy's better suited now as a number 2, number 3 guy even, but could occasionally be your number 1. If the Rockets were to swing a trade for a guy like Jimmy Butler, he would kind of become their number 1 option. Now, that's not to say that he would have the ball in his hands all the time. They would still be a really well-balanced team, a team full of athletes, a team full of young players, right, who could win that way. But in a playoff setting, when you need buckets and you need guys that you can rely on and go to, Jimmy Butler would be that guy. And he would be tasked with carrying the load for this team offensively in a postseason setting. That's something that they are looking for. So this does make sense. And they can make it work without tapping into their young core. And by the way, don't look too much into these trades. I threw these all together. I'm just trying to make it work contractually just to show you guys how difficult a trade like this would be. The picks and everything else like that. I don't know. I don't know what the draft compensation would be for a guy like Jimmy Butler. My mind tells me, since he's a flight risk. He wants a huge contract extension. He's old. He's a guy who's often injured. You know, if I'm a team, I'm not trading 2, 3, 4 first-round picks for a guy like this. I'm talking about trading 1. I'm thinking back to the Dallas Mavericks Kyrie Irving trade. They only gave up 1 first-round pick for Kyrie Irving. A completely different scenario. Kyrie had a lot of off-the-court stuff going on. Weird situation there. He was a flight risk as well, but that's kind of it. I have to pay this guy in the offseason. He's a flight risk. There's some other stuff going on. I'm not trading 3 first-round picks for that. You're getting 1, and you're going to be happy with it. But, Dillon Brooks would have to be in this trade for salary purposes. You would do that if you're the Houston Rockets. Steven Adams, expiring contracts, make that happen. Jayshawn Tate, they're reportedly shopping anyways. Cam Whitmore is playing in the G League for them. They need to consolidate some of these younger players. Cam Whitmore feels like the odd guy out, and then whatever picks. I kind of like it for Houston. You get that guy in Jimmy Butler, and again, you don't tap into your young core, so you could still have a big trade down the line. But if I'm Houston, I'm not making a big swing for a 35-year-old player. I'm letting this season play out. If something pops up at the trade deadline, great. We can maybe do that. We can be, opportunistic at the deadline. But a 35-year-old, no thanks. Especially when there's a very realistic scenario where the Kings sort of flame out between now and the end of the season. The De'Aaron Fox contract situation becomes so weird and awkward, and the Rockets could swing a huge trade for a guy like that who fits their timeline a little bit better and would just be fucking disgusting. De'Aaron Fox to Houston makes so much sense to me that I'm 100% convinced it's going to happen at some point. That's the trade that I'm sort of waiting for. And if we don't make a trade between now and the trade deadline, fine. We're going into the playoffs. We're going into the play-in, wherever we end up with this young group of guys, and we can evaluate them from there. That's really valuable experience. I don't think this makes much sense for Houston. And then that leads us to the Golden State Warriors trade. This one makes a lot more sense to me. They have an aging superstar in Steph Curry. Some might argue that their window is already closed, but if it is open, it's hanging on by a fucking thread. And if they want to make a move, it has to be now. We know that they are interested in Paul George in the offseason. We know that they are interested in Larry Markkinen in the offseason. A move like this would make sense. And you look at the trade package, it kind of makes sense for both sides. Andrew Wiggins would have to be involved for contract purposes. It's either him or Draymond Green. They're not fucking trading Draymond Green. So it'd be Andrew Wiggins. DeAnthony Melton tore his ACL. He's out for the entire season. That's just an expiring contract. Jonathan Kuminga and then Lindy Waters or whatever other small contract they have to make it work. And then whatever picks would be necessary. I'm not sure. Again, I think one first-round pick might just be what it costs. The Warriors, you get a solidified co-star to play next to Stephen Curry and also somebody who, if Steph's out or if you're still wanting to manage Steph's minutes, somebody who can carry an offensive load for you. How would he fit in the system? People say it would be a bad fit. I'm not so sure it would. Jimmy Butler is very capable of playing off ball. I know his three-point shooting isn't the best, but he is somebody who can shoot, and he's a great playmaker and has a great feel for the game. I think that he would fit quite well, actually, in this Warriors system. And if I'm the Heat, yeah, I'm getting Andrew Wiggins. That's a bit of a big contract, but he could still help us win now if that's something that we're interested in. And I get a look at Jonathan Kuminga, who's a restricted free agent in the offseason. There's a lot of upside there. I'm not sure how comfortable the Warriors are paying him a lot of money. Maybe a team like the Heat, who just traded Jimmy Butler. You still have Bam Adebayo. You still have Tyler Hero playing at a high level. Like, I don't think they're going to be bottoming out and tanking. Jonathan Kuminga could help them, and it could be like a young player to build alongside Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo moving forward. It makes a lot of sense. Like, this is the trade right here that makes a lot of sense. I think it's going to require a desperate team. What team is more desperate than the Los Angeles Lakers when it comes to trades and surrounding LeBron James and Anthony Davis with superstars? I tried to make one work. It's really difficult. Again, you're going to have to trade 4 or 5 guys just to make it work contractually. And the big contracts the Lakers have to trade out are just so undesirable. Like D'Angelo Russell. Do the Heat need another guy like that? Not really. Rui Hachimura next to Bam, like the idea of it's kind of interesting. That's something the Heat have been looking for quite some time. But I don't know, $17 million a year for Rui is really the price that I'm willing to pay. And then they just don't have the young pieces. You know, you can attach first-round picks and stuff. I don't think this trade makes sense for either side, to be honest with you. Because if I'm the Lakers, my depth is so thin. It's already been tested so far this season. It has failed every single test that it has had. So I'm not interested in becoming even thinner as a team to go out and get an aging guy like Jimmy Butler. What the fuck does that leave my team 2 or 3 years from now, especially if I pay Jimmy Butler? I have no idea. The Nuggets are also a team that I saw pop up. It's next to impossible to make this happen contractually. Michael Porter Jr. would have to be in the trade, and then you're also adding guys like Zeke Naji. Christian Brown would pretty much have to be in here just to make it work contractually, not even for the players and pieces, just to make this work contractually. And at this point, if I'm the Nuggets, yeah, it's cool. I'm adding Jimmy Butler to Jamal Murray, who's, but Nikola Jokic and Jimmy, like that's a fit that I could see really working. But I'm also taking away the only floor spacing I really have in the form of Michael Porter Jr. I already shoot so little threes in a league in 2024-25 that requires you to shoot and make threes. I'm already shooting so little of them. I'm already such I'm not deep at all, and now I'm cutting even deeper into that depth. I don't think this makes sense. I saw Nuggets fans entertaining the idea of it. I think this would be a fucking disaster for Denver. I really do. Now, Jamal Murray's not eligible to be traded. I do want to say that, because if he was, that's a more interesting conversation with how Jamal has looked so far this season, but this trade doesn't make any sense. I know Jimmy wants to play for a winner. I know that he specifically said he wants to get traded to 2 Texas teams, and there was a third team that was missing from that list, the San Antonio Spurs. But the Spurs have been pretty solid so far this season. They've struggled a little bit as of late. But could they swing for a move like this in an effort to just be a competitive basketball team early in Wemby's career so he can sort of learn from a guy like Jimmy Butler, as well as Chris Paul, obviously, but also get some experience playing in some competitive games? I'm not sure. Like, I don't think they'd have to give up much. They wouldn't have to give up much of their young talent at all to make a trade like this happen. They have so many picks at their disposal. Like, I don't know. This could be an interesting move for the Spurs. I have something else for the Spurs later. So, this was just something to think about. The Spurs do have the contracts to make it work, and they have a lot of picks to play with. So I threw them into the mix. The Hawks were another team that were interesting to me. They're not in control of their own destiny when it comes to tanking and rebuilding. They do not own their pick this upcoming season that is going to the San Antonio Spurs. I believe they also owe a 2027 pick to the San Antonio Spurs. So it's not like they can just tear down their entire team and rebuild. They're going to try to be competitive in the coming years, and they've been a pretty solid team so far this season. Could a trade like this make sense? DeAndre Hunter has been good for them. He's making $21 million a year. A year ago, I'd have told you that was a fucking terrible contract, but he has been good for them so far this season. Okongwu's been pretty much a bust, and I think that they would very happily add him in a trade like this, and then you have some other contracts to make it work. I'm not so sure that this is a return that's even remotely interesting if you're the Miami Heat. But if I'm the Hawks, I can squint and see a Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Jimmy Butler, Jalen Johnson, Capella lineup and think, that's not half bad. In the Eastern Conference, I feel like I could win a playoff series with that. That's, of course, not the only thing that Shams Charania dropped in this article. I feel like it's rare that we get an early December article like this from Shams Charania where there's like legitimately juicy tidbits in there. Of course, there was notes about Brandon Ingram and him wanting a huge contract extension and the Pelicans not wanting to give him that and then him being on the trade market. We've already known all of this, but I thought this was really interesting that the Pelicans and Timberwolves were talking about a trade centered around Brandon Ingram and Karl Anthony Towns during the season last year, which is kind of interesting. I do remember there being some rumblings during the season, even though the Timberwolves were off to a great start, that there could be a cat trade before the trade deadline. Obviously, that didn't happen. The Timberwolves made the conference finals and then ended up trading Karl Anthony Towns in the offseason. But I just thought that was a little bit interesting to imagine a world where that happened. It's very difficult to figure out a Brandon Ingram trade. It doesn't help that now he's out with a high ankle sprain. He'll be back at some point in the season. So if you're trading for him or you're interested in trading for him, I don't think this injury changes much for you. But the idea that you're going to have to pay him $50 million or at least $40-ish million in the offseason, that's a difficult pill to swallow. Now, there are some reports in the offseason that things between the Jazz and Pelicans were heating up pretty significantly, but Brandon Ingram did not want to go to Utah, did not want to sign a contract to play for the Utah Jazz, so those talks sort of fizzled out. I'm wondering if the way the season has gone, the fact that Brandon Ingram has changed his agency, has changed his opinion on anything. If they're like, hey, the Jazz want you, they're willing to pay you, you should just take that contract extension because I don't know what your market is going to look like. If that's the case, could we return to a trade that I'm assuming would be centered around Walker Kessler if this were to pick up again? Walker Kessler has been legitimately good so far this season for the Jazz, so I'm not sure if this is something that they would be all that interested in. And plus, the Pelicans, Yves Missi is like the lone bright spot of the season for them. Their rookie center has been really, really solid, so this isn't as pressing of a need as it might have been a few months ago when you were talking about this trade. I mean, this trade does make some sense to me. It's not at all what the Lakers need. They need some intensity. They need some defense. They need some guys who have that dog in them, and I don't think Brandon Ingram checks those boxes. But they also need a third creator, and Brandon Ingram does check that box. And the trade package to give him up wouldn't be like the end of the world for them. D'Lo, Rui, this makes the contracts work. And I just don't think the Pelicans are going to get a huge return for Brandon Ingram in a trade for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. I don't know. People have talked about the Memphis Grizzlies for Brandon Ingram. That just does not feel like a Memphis Grizzlies move at all to me. Because, again, you'd be paying him $40 million in the offseason. You think the Grizzlies are going to do that? I really don't. How about this tweet right here? Has Jimmy Butler been leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, so subliminal messaging, telling us where he wants to be moving forward? He dyed his hair yellow. I guess, that's for the Golden State Warriors, apparently. The blue for the Dallas Mavericks. Red? You thought that was for the Miami Heat? No! It's for the Houston Rockets. Just something to consider. Also in this article, Shams reported that the Pelicans, who are 5-20, Jesus Christ. Before the season started, I predicted them to have the season from hell and miss out on the play-in tournament entirely. I did not think it would be this level of terrible. But teams have already started expressing interest in the Pelicans supporting cast players such as Herb Jones and C.J. McCollum. C.J. McCollum's interesting. He's making a decent amount of money. A pure bucket getter, a great three-point shooter. The contract makes it weird. I don't know how many teams would be all that interested in trading for that. The Warriors aren't interesting to me. Imagining C.J. McCollum, you fucking stay there. Imagining C.J. McCollum playing next to Steph Curry, that floor spacing, that would be pretty sick. But Herb Jones, I just want to talk about this really quickly because I've seen Mavericks fans mainly talk about Maxi Kleber, Max, whatever picks, make it happen. Here's the thing, guys. Herb Jones is 26 years old. He's on one of the friendliest contracts in the league. I think he's making $15 million, $14 million, $14 million over the next 3 years. I don't see a world where the Pelicans trading him makes sense unless a team blows their fucking door off. And we're talking about a guy like Herb Jones who's, 26 with a great contract. It's not only contending teams that are going to be interested in a guy like that. Every single team in the league, if the Pelicans were really interested in trading him, every single team in the league would make that phone call. Just remember this past offseason, the Washington Wizards traded Deni Avdija to the Portland Trailblazers. That was a move that left a bunch of people scratching their heads. But that's because Deni Avdija was a cost-controlled young wing who, you figure 3-4 years from now could still be on my team when I'm trying to be good. So I just can't imagine a scenario where a team like the Mavericks has the pieces necessary to go out and get a guy like Herb Jones, even if they traded everything they had at their disposal. I don't know if that would work because I'm imagining a team like the Thunder who could go out and get a Herb Jones and saying, you want 3-4 first-round picks? We can do that. A team like the Spurs, you want 3 first-round picks, 4 first-round picks, we can make that happen. The Jazz, they really wanted a wing player in the offseason. They wanted Mikal Bridges. They wanted OG Anunoby. They wanted, Pascal Siakam at the trade deadline last year. I remember all those rumors. They'll go out and offer, 3 first-round picks for Herb Jones. Why not? What's the harm? He's 26 years old, barely making any money. I can't imagine a scenario where he gets traded. It'd be stupid as fuck, in my opinion. Of course, there's some Brooklyn Nets moves. They're open to trading pretty much everybody, which should be the case. They've been too good for their own good so far this season. 10-14. The way the rest of the league looks, they need to start losing some games quickly if they want to solidify themselves as a bottom 5 team. And the best way to do that is to trade the guys. The best way to do that is to trade Dennis Schroder. He's way too good for you. He's just in control late in games. He's somebody you can put the ball in the hands of and you feel like you're going to get a good shot, whether that's for himself or whether he's creating an opportunity for somebody else. A bunch of teams in the league could use a guy like Dennis Schroder. He's making $13 million this year. That is a very easily tradable contract. What I am curious of, are you getting a first for Dennis Schroder? Are you getting multiple firsts for Dennis Schroder? I've seen teams and get people on Twitter suggest blah, blah, blah in a second, blah, blah, blah in a couple seconds. I'm just not so sure that cuts it. Like the Warriors, I think, would be a really nice fit for Dennis Schroder, and they're apparently interested in all of the Brooklyn Nets guys, like D'Anthony Melton, who's recovering from a knee injury and just an expiring contract, and an upcoming first in this year's draft. Does that make it happen? Is that too much for the Warriors? Or are the Nets looking for more than that? I can't imagine with a guy who's expiring like Schroder, and this is basically a rental. I think a team like Orlando would fit Dennis Schroder like a fucking glove. Like Cole Anthony and a first-round pick in this upcoming draft. Are the Nets interested in taking on salary for the next few years? And a guy like Cole Anthony, I'm not sure. I wonder about the picks because there's so many teams across the league who are now entering this competing window who have so many picks to throw around. Like, all it takes is one team to offer a first for Dennis Schroder, and all of a sudden that is his market, and you have to be competing against that. So I'm not sure. I'm very interested to see what his trade market would look like. Because if it is just like expiring contracts and second-round picks, I would love for the Clippers to be in on this. I think he makes a ton of sense for a team like Los Angeles off their bench. Kevin Porter Jr. has not been the guy that you've wanted him to be. Hate to see it. Really unfortunate to happen to a guy like that. But you got, PJ Tucker's expiring deal. Bones Highland. I want to see, but if you are really interested in tanking, listen to me closely, Brooklyn Nets. If you're really interested in tanking, we want to see Cam Thomas and Bones Highland on the floor together. That's what we want. We want to see those two on the court at the same time, please. But those two guys, PJ Tucker, Bones Highland, expiring deals, and a couple second-round picks, like, could the Clippers swing that? That'd be huge for them. Cam Johnson is an interesting one. He's similar to Herb Jones in the sense that he's 28. It's not like he's 30-plus. It's not like you're trading for an old veteran that a team is just desperate to get off of. And he's under contract for the next 3 years. He's making more money than Herb Jones, $22 million a year. But for his skill set, for his size, for the shooting and spacing that he provides, and plus some of the on-ball stuff that he has shown this season, I think that's more than worth it from a contract perspective. The thing is he has openly stated that he's 100% cool with staying with the Brooklyn Nets, and we've seen the Brooklyn Nets over the years not trade these guys. They've held on to Dorian Finney-Smith instead of trading him when everybody thought they were going to trade him. They held on to Nick Claxton when everyone thought that they were going to trade him and extended him. So I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be on the market 100%, but if he is, I would expect the return to be huge for a guy like this. Like the Knicks traded 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and Mikal Bridges is a better player than Cam Johnson in a vacuum, and I think Mikal Bridges, when the Knicks made that trade, his value was across the league was much higher than Cam Johnson's. But I'm expecting multiple first-round picks and maybe young players to be the return for Cam Johnson, and I'm just not so sure a team's going to meet that. Like the Warriors, they're interested. D'Anthony Melton, Gary Payton, Brandon Podziemski in a couple of seconds. Is that even enough for the Nets? Like, are the Nets wanting Kuminga in that deal? I'm not sure what you've seen from Pods this year is even really worth that. I'm not sure. I'm really interested to see what Cam Johnson's market would be. Again, Mavs fans who are interested in this, I promise you, they do not have the assets to make it happen. It would be shocking if it worked out. They don't have the assets. Think more Dorian Finney-Smith, but again, I'm not so sure that makes much sense for the Mavs. I want to say this to Mavs fans. Okay, I want to say this right now. We're going to do our huge trade deadline prediction video a couple months from now, so be on the lookout for that when it comes. I don't think the Mavs are going to do anything at the deadline. If they do, it'll be small. I'd be surprised. Knock on wood, of course, because I'm assuming that things sort of maintain the way that they have. They'll deal with some injuries here and there, obviously. Every team does. But, I just don't see a huge pressing need on this roster, or at least a pressing need that there's, obtainable assets for, and guys that you have the assets to go and get. Like trading Maxi Kleber, who has 2 years left at $11 million, that's a stinky-ass contract. Like, yeah, it works for salary matching purposes, but no team out there is like, fuck yeah, Maxi Kleber? Hell yeah, we want him. So you're attaching picks to Maxi Kleber, and I'm just not so sure what the return is for a guy like that. The other things in this article is behind a paywall, so I'm giving it to you for free. You're welcome. The Pacers are looking for a backup center. I would expect that deal to be fucking gross. Like, everyone's like, yeah, Nick Richards, Day'Ron Sharp. No, that's probably going to be a disgusting swing for a guy like Daniel Tice. I hate when ESPN and Shams Charania talks about the Suns because it's very clear that they have just been given what to say by Matt Ishbia. There's optimism that MVP candidate Kevin Durant can return from ankle sprain on Friday against Utah Jazz or Sunday home for the Portland Trailblazers. The Suns are 11-2 with Durant in the lineup this season. As the Suns look into trades, they have a 2031 first-round pick and 3 second-round picks. Eligible to move 3 second-round picks. Holy shit. Remember, the Suns are a second apron team, so they can only match salaries. They cannot aggregate salaries in any trade. So a trade for them feels very difficult. But, we've heard Grayson Allen, Nurkic. These guys are on the trade market. We'll see. Multiple teams have begun expressing interest in a group of Portland's veterans, Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, and Robert Williams III, as the Trailblazers make decisions on their roster. Jeremy Grant is an interesting one. Obviously, they did not want to trade him last trade deadline. They did not want to trade him in the offseason. I think that he's somebody who could really, really help a team, and it's a guy who would be a third, fourth, fifth option on a team, would look much different, and we'd really appreciate his game a little bit more. I'm interested to see what his trade market would look like. Anthony Simons is also interesting. Like, when he catches fire, there's not a lot of guys like him in the league, but, he kind of needs the ball in his hands. He's somebody who is horrible. I mean, horrible defensively. Those are difficult players to gauge the value of. Rob Will, obviously, is very interesting. He's one of those guys who I could see a lot of teams sort of talking themselves into at the deadline, and the price for him kind of goes up a little bit because you have 4, 5, 6 teams that are bidding for him. No DeAndre Ayton mentioned. Interesting. And then finally, our guy Kyle Kuzma, the Wizards are shopping him. There's a crazy, sliding doors moment in the NBA currently where Kyle Kuzma says, I want to go to the Dallas Mavericks, and they trade for him instead of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. What a different world we're living in if that happened. And he is making $25 million, so matching salaries and stuff would be interesting. But knowing the Dallas Mavericks, they return to guys like these. And I'm not sure he even fits the roster, but I'm saying it's not impossible that we hear some reports that the Mavericks are checking in on Kyle Kuzma again. I don't know how it would work contractually, but I don't think it's impossible. If you've watched any Washington Wizards games at all this season, what the fuck are you doing? But also beyond that, Kyle Kuzma's been on some bullshit so far. So I'd be interested to see what his market would look like because it's not the most appealing contract, and the way that he's played so far this season, it's kind of difficult to talk yourself into. This is a longer video. I thought that I would just throw this on the Clips channel. It'd be 10 minutes long, but once I started getting into it, once I started making trades myself, it really took a turn. If you're upset about some of the mock trades you saw, again, don't be. I was just, the Jimmy Butler one, I was just trying to show you how complicated it is to make this stuff work contractually. The GMs, these front office guys get paid millions and millions of dollars. They can make it work, but it's going to be difficult. And I'm sure the return for the Heat, if he does get traded, is not going to be what Heat fans want or are expecting. Just, I want you guys to know that. It's probably going to be gross. It's probably going to be expiring contracts and maybe a pick, maybe 2. If you're lucky. Guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are so close to being the #1 subscribed to channel on all of YouTube, so make sure you guys subscribe. I love you all, okay?